So I know I am late when it comes to this subject, but I don't really care. The personal things that I do take priority over what I do here on YouTube. But with that said, I do want to talk about some Capcom fans, specifically the Devil May Cry and Resident Evil fan bases, talking about specific games that did not show up at E3 and why it is not a big deal. I'm talking about Devil May Cry 5 and Resident Evil 2 Remake. Those two games not showing up at E3, it's just not a big deal. And I don't know why people were so upset about the fact that those two games did not show up at E3. It's almost like people forgot that there were 3 other game shows right after E3. So those two games not showing up is not the end of the world, but yet people treated it as such. I mean, I have to ask, did you all forget that there was 3 other game shows this year? We have Gamescom, Tokyo Game Show, and then towards the end of the year, PlayStation Experience. I'm trying to understand why is it such a big deal that Devil May Cry 5, if that game is even happening, doesn't show up at E3, or why it didn't show up at E3. Like, I want to understand why that is such a big deal. I want to understand why it's such a big deal that Resident Evil 2 Remake didn't show up at E3. Because I don't fucking see why it's a big deal. You have 3 other fucking game shows where these games could be announced at. And even in the case with, like, Devil May Cry 5, we don't even know if it's happening. We just know that Itsuno has plans to announce a new game this year. It could literally be anything. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be Devil May Cry 5. Stop fucking creating false hope for yourself. Like seriously, just fucking stop it. Regardless of which game I'm talking about, to me it just doesn't make sense why this has to be made out into a really big deal, especially considering the fact that there are 3 other major game shows. And I have to hammer that point in because I don't know if all of you are like this. I don't know if some of you are more reasonable about this and understand that, or whether or not some of you just want it as soon as possible. I would much rather be patient when it comes to these things, especially when it's something like Resident Evil 2 Remake. I'm fucking worried that that game's going to turn into a piece of shit, but that's a whole nother story in on itself. And then there's also, even if it's Devil May Cry 5, how do you know that this announcement is going to be hype? It's kind of the same thing with Resident Evil 2 Remake if you really think about it. How do you know if these game announcements will be hype? Because they could turn around, Capcom could turn around and they could come out with the shittiest sort of presentation for both of those games. And it could make you pissed. Like, you'd just turn around and be like, what the fuck is this shit? What did you do to these games? So, to me, I would much rather be patient when it comes to the announcements of these games, and especially if a Devil May Cry 5 happens, because I want to stress the fact that we don't know if that game is happening. We know that Resident Evil 2 Remake is happening, and that's a little bit more frightening in my opinion, to know that Capcom could potentially fuck that up versus a game that we don't know if is actually happening or not. I think it would be best to just wait and see, because you never know if these games will turn out to be just utter shit at their announcements, or if Capcom could actually do right by the fans. So just wait and see, wait for these other game shows to pass by, and then start being upset if you actually see those games and they don't live up to the expectations that you have. But in the meantime, fucking be excited for the games that we know are coming out, that you can be excited about.